which for me would be just cool, right? It's cool to be doing groundbreaking stuff, I think. All right, next, threats. So let's look at threats. Remember, when we're talking about threats, we're thinking specifically about intent, the intent to harm, right? In terms of genocide, it was the intent to harm in whole or in part, ... or the intent to destroy in whole or in part. The idea is, insofar as we, and I don't have the time to go into a discussion of intentionality, it's tremendously complex, but the idea is we identify as a seminal foundation in intent human agency. It is human agency that is at the core of intentionality. We don't talk about objects having intent, properly speaking. Now, that's probably going to change. I'm doing some work on this right now. Note to self, I need to think about objective agency. I need to think about that. But anyway, anyway, focus, Jason. Intent is based in agency, right? Intent is based in human agency, and thus, when we talk about threat assessment, we're talking about the will, the intent, the motivations, to a lesser extent, of individual or a collective grouping of actors in an antithetical relationship, an aggressive, intentfully harmful relationship with a sovereignty, right? So let's check out how this unfolds. So first bit under threats. While assessing risks, is certainly a part of intelligence. Systemically, internally, the function of intelligence is to gain insight into potential threats before they are realized as an attack. So, I mean, just sort of conceptually, this is obvious, right? We have a threat, which manifests itself as an attack, but that threat is a product of intent. And that intent is a product of human agency. Right? Because we have human agency, we have the ability to formalize intent. Since we have the ability to formalize intent, some of the intent that we are able to formalize manifest in terms of threat. That threat then manifests in terms of act, the terrorist attack, the act of sort of blowing crap up. Thus, human agency, at least some aspects of our human agency, can result in attacks, can result in destruction. I don't want to go on my soapbox with this, but this is your problem with the assumption of sort of perpetual peace. And I don't mean this necessarily in a Kantian sense, but and do I want to go into, I don't particularly want to get into that discourse, but you know, there is inherently the possibility in human agency for destructive action. There is inherently in human agency the possibility for violence. There is inherently in human agency the possibility for evil, giving a pretty rigorous definition. So the idea is, you know, the attempt to construct conceptually, for me, any at all theoretical framework which undermines or delegitimizes the possibility for violence in the world, I cannot on any account accept. I can't accept that. I don't accept that. And for me, as a theorist, those arguments are the easiest to destroy. I don't really even get any gratification in responding to systems that are built under that presumption. You know, I just don't, because it's wishful thinking at best. So I'm not trying to be pessimistic here, but if you think about the possibilities of human agency, it is obviously the case that human agency, at least for some, and all you need is one. For a counterexample, one instance, we have way more than that. There's a tendency. The idea is the possibility for human agency, more than not, manifests in violence, intentful violence, intentful harmful action, systematically intentful harmful action, right? It just is the case. So I'm telling you this right now, my construction of national security affairs, when I get to really doing the real work and really formally writing this, is going to take as a given, as an undeniable, logical given, that fact, which is the inherency of violence in all human interaction, right? And from there, we're gonna build something solid. But that's my point. If you don't agree with that, once you read what it is that I do, critique me on that grounds, and we'll move on from there. But in terms of the lecture series, this is where I'm starting, right? So this is in terms of threat assessment. Threat assessment is itself related to, by implication, human agency. So threat assessment, quote, the need for intelligence becomes increasingly significant and difficult, right? It becomes increasingly significant and difficult. The increased difficulty is a product of the lack of knowledge, which results in vulnerabilities and ultimately weakness. There is, on my YouTube page, I think it's either education is power or knowledge is power. I forget what I have in the corner. But both are true. Education is power. Knowledge is power. This idea of weakness, of systemic vulnerability, is a consequence of a lack of knowledge. It's precisely the things that we do not know that serve to be the greatest systemic threat to any national security affairs. Right? Any national security intelligence program, any national security paradigm, and all of the different aspects of security within the nation, it's the things that we don't know that undermine that power. It's precisely the knowledge that we don't have. So that the idea has to be, and this should be clear and obvious, the idea has to be that in terms of security, security is facilitated by knowledge. Knowledge, the whole role of knowledge, the whole role of gaining and garnering greater epistemic accessibility to facts, to information, to, which is really difficult, intentionality, to the intent of others, is to incorporate that information in order to better secure, on the one hand, and on the other hand, in order to better promote, propagate the ideological stance of Nation X. Right? It's both. It's both security, but it's also both what I would say as, not I say, but what has been said within existentialism as a being in the world, right? Being, existing in the world. This being in the world, this is existing in the world, we can conceptually, this is a bit more abstract and I'm not going to touch this point, but for those of you who might like this, I'll give you a little goodie. This being in the world doesn't only have to manifest, I argue, and there's tons of evidence for this, it doesn't only have to manifest as individual agency, the being, the ontology of individual agency in the world. We can talk about an individual sovereignty's being in the world, the being of the sovereignty as manifest in the world. Because there was a point at which the sovereignty entered. But when the sovereignty entered the world landscape was already here. And I don't mean geospatially. I don't mean geopolitically. It's more of a dynamic relation of power and force. That already existed prior to the emergence of the new state. And there's tons of poli-sci people cornered the field on this. They have probably the best discourse on the emergence of the state in blood, in destruction, in genocide, which is just a fact. So that the idea is that the emergence of the state emerges out of this sort of, it just does. Could it do it in a better way? Sure. The historical fact is that the emergence of the state arises outside of genocidal atrocities, outside of intentful, systematic destruction of rivalry and external threats. And insofar as we can talk about the emergence of the state emerges then within something, within a substrate that was already there. And then what the state seeks to do is to transform the nature of that substrate. So that part of this is a recognition, and this is important, right? A recognition of the mode in which the state exists and the influence that the state has on this global social nexus. I'm not going to go much deeper than that because that's already tremendously deep for YouTube. But yeah, its mode of existence, state acts